Unaware she was a billionaire's sister, he publicly humiliated her at his birthday party. Before you press play and forget this in 5 minutes, let me ask you something. Have you ever been looked at like you were nothing? Like your whole life, your struggles, your love meant nothing to the person judging you? If you have felt that even once, this story is for you. Because what happened at that birthday party in front of 200 rich guests, under gold lights and crystal chandeliers, was one of the cruelest things a brother ever did to a sister. And he did not even know she was his sister. Stay with me to the end, because the last 5 minutes of this story will make you call someone you love tonight. Her name was Grace Whitfield. She was 61 years old. She had raised her daughter alone after her husband passed away too young. She worked as a seamstress, mending wedding dresses and suits for a small shop downtown, the kind of shop with a bell on the door and a coffee pot always half full. She was not rich. She was not famous. But she was kind in the quiet way that does not ask for applause. Grace had a brother, once, a long time ago before the world split her family in two. Let me take you back 40 years so you understand what was lost and why it mattered so much on that terrible night. Grace grew up in a small house with a leaking roof and a mother who worked 2 jobs. Her little brother was named Daniel. Grace was 8 years older, and she was the one who braided his hair before school, who gave him her share of dinner when there was not enough, who sang him to sleep when their parents fought in the next room. She loved that boy more than she loved herself. Then their parents divorced. It was not a gentle divorce. It was a war. And in that war, the father took Daniel, moved across the country, changed his name for reasons Grace never fully understood, and disappeared. Grace's mother fought for years to find him, spent money they did not have on lawyers and letters that were never answered. Eventually, she had to stop. Not because she stopped loving him, because the pain of chasing a door that never opened was breaking her. Grace never stopped wondering about her little brother. Every birthday, she would light a candle for him, even though she did not know where he was, even though she did not know his new name, even though, for all she knew, he did not remember she existed at all. She kept a small wooden box on her dresser, the kind with a chipped lid and a rusted little latch. Inside it, she kept a photograph, faded and soft at the corners, of 2 children sitting on a porch step, the older girl with her arm wrapped tight around a small boy who was missing his front tooth. She kept a single baby shoe, his first shoe, the one he wore before they took him away. She kept a folded piece of paper with a child's handwriting on it, a crooked drawing of a stick-figure family standing under a yellow sun, with the words "Me and Danny" written underneath in pencil. For 40 years, on nights when the apartment felt too quiet, Grace would take that box down from the shelf, open it slowly, and remember a boy who might not even remember her at all. She never told many people about that box. Some grief is too tender to explain out loud. You simply carry it quietly year after year, hoping that somewhere, somehow, the person you are grieving is safe. Now I want you to sit with that feeling for a moment, because so many of you watching this have a similar story. A sibling you lost touch with, a child who moved away and stopped calling, a face you have not seen in decades but still see clearly when you close your eyes at night. If that is you, I want you to know you are not alone in that ache. And if this story is already touching something inside you, do me one favor before we go further. Press that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will stay with you, and I do not want you to lose this channel before the story is finished. Now let's go forward. 20 years passed. That baby brother, Daniel, grew up under a new name given by his father's new wife. He was called Nathan Cole, and Nathan Cole did not grow up poor. His father remarried into money, real money, the kind that builds skyscrapers and buys entire city blocks. Nathan was raised in mansions, taught by private tutors, driven to school in cars that cost more than most houses. By the time he was 40 years old, Nathan Cole was one of the richest men in the country. His face was on business magazines. His company built hotels in cities Grace had only seen in postcards. Nathan did not remember much about his early childhood. His father told him his mother had abandoned them. He told him there had been no sister, or if there was, she had not wanted him. Nathan grew up believing he had never been loved by that side of his family. He grew up with a wound he did not even know the shape of. And wounds like that, the ones we do not understand, often turn into cruelty toward others, not because a person is evil, but because a broken heart, left untreated for 40 years, becomes hard as stone. Growing up, Nathan was taught, gently at first and then more firmly as he got older, that the world was divided into 2 kinds of people: those who had succeeded and those who simply had not tried hard enough. His stepmother, a woman raised in old money herself, often reminded him at the dinner table that struggle was usually a sign of poor choices, not poor luck. His father, busy building his empire, rarely questioned this. And so young Daniel, now called Nathan, absorbed a quiet lesson that shaped him more than any business degree ever could. He learned to measure people at a glance: the cut of their clothes, the condition of their hands, the confidence or lack of it in how they walked into a room. He was never taught to ask why someone's hands were rough or why someone's shoes were worn thin. He was only taught to notice and to judge. By the time he was an adult, this way of seeing the world felt as natural to him as breathing, so natural that he never once stopped to question where it had come from or what it had cost him. This is important because it explains everything that happened next, even though it does not excuse it. Nathan Cole was turning 45, and to celebrate, he threw the biggest birthday party his city had seen in years: 300 guests, a mansion lit up like a palace, an orchestra, ice sculptures shaped like swans, champagne that cost more per bottle than Grace made in a month. Grace was not invited. Let me be very clear about that. She had no idea this party existed. She had no idea Nathan Cole was her brother. To her, he was just a stranger's face on the cover of a magazine she never bought. But her daughter, Emily, worked for an event company, and that company was hired to help set up the flowers and the table linens for Nathan Cole's birthday party. Emily's supervisor called in sick that week, and Emily, exhausted and short-staffed, asked her mother to come help her finish the tablecloths and floral arrangements the morning of the party. Grace agreed, the way mothers always do when their child needs an extra pair of hands. They arrived early before the guests. Grace in a simple gray dress, the same dress she wore to church, carrying a sewing kit in case any of the chair covers needed a quick stitch. She was not dressed for a party. She was dressed for work. Here is where the story turns, and I want you to really feel this part because it happened in front of everyone. As the sun went down and the guests began arriving in gowns and tuxedos, Grace stayed a little longer than she planned, helping Emily fix a torn seam on one of the table's skirts near the entrance. She was kneeling by a table, needle in hand, when Nathan Cole walked through the grand hallway with a group of his business partners, all of them laughing, all of them holding champagne glasses. He saw Grace kneeling there in her plain gray dress, gray hair pulled back, hands rough from decades of sewing work. And in front of everyone, in front of investors and celebrities and camera phones already recording for social media, Nathan Cole said something that made the whole room go quiet. He asked loudly, mockingly, why someone like that was even allowed inside his home. He said she looked like she had wandered in from the street. He told a nearby guard to get her out before she embarrasses herself further. He said it with a laugh, the kind of laugh that rich men sometimes use to turn cruelty into comedy, so that everyone around him would laugh too, afraid to be the only one who did not. And some of them did laugh. A few guests even lifted their phones, recording the moment, the way people sometimes do when cruelty becomes entertainment for a crowd that does not want to think too hard about what it is watching. Someone whispered, loud enough for Grace to hear, that she must have snuck in for the free food. Another guest, a young woman in a shimmering gown, laughed behind her champagne glass and turned away, as if Grace's humiliation was simply part of the evening's entertainment, no different from the string quartet playing softly near the fountain. Nobody in that hallway knew her name. Nobody asked why she was kneeling by that table. They only saw a plain gray dress and rough, working hands, and in that one glance, they decided everything about who she was and what she was worth. Grace stood up slowly. Her hands were shaking, not from anger, but from the kind of humiliation that goes so deep it feels like your whole life is being judged in one sentence. She did not say a word back to him. She simply looked at him, this stranger who reminded her in some small, unexplainable way of the little boy she used to sing to sleep. Something about his eyes. She could not explain it, but it hurt in a way she did not understand yet. Emily tried to pull her mother away, whispering apologies to the security guard who looked embarrassed himself. Grace walked out through the side door, past the swan ice sculptures, into the cold night air, and she cried in the car for almost 20 minutes before she could even start the engine. I want to pause here and ask you something. How many of you have been judged by how you look, by what you wear, by how much money is in your bank account, instead of by what is actually in your heart? If this story is stirring that memory in you right now, I want you to type the word "seen" in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you have not already subscribed, please do it now, because Grace's story is about to take a turn that none of you will expect, and I do not want you to miss it. Now here is where the truth begins to surface. After the party, one of Nathan's assistants, a young woman named Priya, felt uneasy about what had happened. She had seen the humiliation, and something about it bothered her all night. Nathan Cole had a strict policy, actually written into his household staff handbook, that any unscheduled person on the property during an event needed a background check for security reasons, standard procedure for a man of his wealth. It was simply protocol, nothing personal. But when Priya pulled the basic records for Grace Whitfield, something strange appeared. An old adoption and custody file, decades old, sealed but partially referenced in a public court index, connected to a name change case from over 40 years ago. A name change involving a boy named Daniel Whitfield, who had become Nathan Cole. Priya almost did not believe what she was looking at. She sat at her desk at midnight, staring at the screen, her hands cold. She did not know if she should say anything. Some secrets feel too big to hand to another person. But she also knew that if this was true, Nathan had humiliated his own sister in front of 300 people, and he did not even know it. The next morning, she brought the file to him with shaking hands. Nathan read it twice, then a third time. His face went pale. He remembered nothing of his early years clearly, only fragments, a small house, a woman singing, a girl braiding his hair. He had always thought those were dreams, not memories. He had always been told there was no sister. He sat alone in his enormous office, in a house full of expensive things that suddenly felt completely empty. And for the first time in a very long time, Nathan Cole cried. I want you to imagine that moment for yourself. Imagine spending your whole life believing you were unloved, unwanted, abandoned by your birth family, only to discover that the woman who loved you the most, who had thought of you every single birthday for 40 years, was the very same woman you just humiliated in front of the entire world. That is not just guilt. That is grief for time you can never get back. If you have ever lost time with someone you love, whether through distance, through a fight, through pride, I want you to know that this feeling Nathan felt in that office is a feeling worth avoiding while you still have the chance to pick up the phone and call the person you have been avoiding. Life is shorter than we think. And if this story is reminding you of someone specific right now, please hit that subscribe button before you go looking for their number, because I promise you, the ending of this story is going to need you to be here for it. Nathan did not sleep that night. He had his lawyer confirm everything through the sealed court records the next morning. There was no mistake. Grace Whitfield, 61 years old, seamstress, widow, the woman he had humiliated in front of 300 guests, was his older sister. He drove to her small apartment above the tailor's shop himself. No driver, no assistant. He stood outside her door for almost 10 minutes before he found the courage to knock. When Grace opened the door and saw him standing there, she felt her whole body go cold. She thought he had come to threaten her, to warn her never to speak of the incident, the way powerful people sometimes do when they feel embarrassed. Instead, Nathan Cole, one of the richest men in the country, stood on her doorstep with tears in his eyes and said only one sentence. He said, "Do you remember singing to me?" Grace's needle, which she had been holding out of habit, fell from her hand. She looked at him for a long moment, at the eyes she had noticed the night before without understanding why they hurt her heart. And slowly, 40 years of grief broke open at once. She whispered his real name, the name she had not said out loud since she was a teenage girl, Daniel. He nodded, and then this powerful man, who commanded boardrooms and built cities, fell apart in the doorway of a small apartment above a tailor's shop. And his sister, the woman he had humiliated in front of the whole world less than 24 hours earlier, held him the way she used to when he was small and afraid of thunderstorms. They sat together at her small kitchen table for hours that night, the same table where Grace had eaten 1,000 quiet dinners alone after her husband passed. She brought out the old wooden box from her dresser, her hands trembling as she opened the chipped lid for the first time in front of another living soul. She showed him the faded photograph of the two of them on the porch step. She showed him the small baby shoe she had kept for 4 decades. She showed him the crooked child's drawing, the stick figure family under a yellow sun, with the words "Me and Danny" still visible in soft pencil. Nathan held that drawing in his hands for a long time without speaking, running his thumb over the fold marks that 40 years of careful keeping had worn into the paper. He did not remember drawing it, but something in his chest recognized it anyway, the way a body sometimes remembers what the mind has been told to forget. I have to stop here for a moment because I think many of you watching already have tears in your eyes, and if you do, that is okay. That is what this story is for. It is for remembering that forgiveness, real forgiveness, is one of the most powerful things a human heart can offer another person, even after deep hurt. Grace did not owe him that forgiveness. Nobody would have blamed her for closing that door, but she chose love anyway because that is who she had always been. The story does not end there, and I promise you, what happened next will restore your faith in people. Nathan Cole did something almost nobody expected. 2 weeks later, he held a press conference, not to promote a new hotel or a business deal, but to publicly apologize. He stood in front of the same cameras that had recorded his cruelty and said, without hiding anything, that he had humiliated an innocent woman out of ignorance and inherited pride. And that woman turned out to be the sister he had spent his whole life mourning without knowing her name. He said publicly that wealth had taught him to judge people by their appearance, and that lesson had cost him decades with the one person who never stopped loving him. He did not do this for publicity, though, of course, the story spread everywhere. He did it because Grace deserved to have her dignity returned to her in front of the same eyes that had watched it taken away. He also did something quieter, something the cameras did not see. He paid off the mortgage on the tailor shop where Grace had worked for over 20 years, not as charity, but as a brother trying imperfectly to make up for lost birthdays, lost holidays, lost decades. Grace, in her humble way, insisted on still working there 3 days a week, because sewing was not just a job to her, it was a piece of who she was, and money could never replace that. Nathan started visiting every Sunday. At first it was awkward, 2 strangers wearing familiar faces trying to remember how to be family, but slowly, over months, they built something new out of the wreckage of what was taken from them. He learned that Grace had a favorite song their mother used to hum. He learned that Emily, his niece, made the same crooked smile their mother used to make. He learned, piece by piece, who he had been before the world told him he had no one. Grace's mother had passed away 12 years earlier, never knowing what became of her son. But before she died, she had written a letter, sealed and kept with a family lawyer, meant to be opened only if Daniel was ever found. When Nathan finally read that letter, in his sister's small living room, with his niece sitting quietly beside him, he read his mother's handwriting for the first time in 40 years. She had written that she forgave his father completely, that she hoped Daniel had grown into a good man, and that no matter how much time passed, her love for him had never once run out. He read that letter 3 times, and then he asked Grace if he could keep the original candle she used to light every birthday for him, the one she had never stopped lighting even in the years she thought he was lost forever. I want to ask you something before we close this story. How many candles have you lit for someone, whether they knew it or not? How many people have you never stopped hoping to see again? This story is a reminder that it is never too late to reach out, to apologize, to forgive, or simply to say the words we so often save for tomorrow. Tomorrow is not promised, but today, right now, you can still make the call. If this story moved you even a little, I want to ask you for one small thing before you go. Subscribe to this channel, not just for me, but for every story like Grace's that deserves to be told and remembered. There are so many more stories waiting for you here, stories about family, about second chances, about the quiet strength of people who are never in the headlines but who carry more grace, if you will forgive the small joke, than anyone the world calls powerful. 1 year later, Nathan Cole held another birthday party. Smaller this time. No swan ice sculptures. No 300 strangers in designer gowns. Just family, a handful of close friends, and his sister Grace sitting at the head of the table, in the same simple gray dress she wore that terrible night, worn now not out of poverty, but out of choice. A quiet reminder to everyone in that room of exactly how far love had traveled to find its way home. He stood up that night, glass in hand, and instead of a toast about business success or another good year, he simply looked at his sister and said thank you for never stopping the search, even after the whole world told her to give up. Grace smiled, the way mothers and sisters do when the years of waiting finally feel worth it, and she raised her own glass, and she said the only words that mattered. Welcome home, little brother. If this story touched your heart tonight, please take 30 seconds to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story like this one. And before you go, tell me in the comments, is there someone in your own life you have been meaning to call, someone you have not spoken to in far too long? Because if Grace's story teaches us anything, it is that it is never too late until suddenly it is. Do not wait for the version of this story where the letter arrives, after it is too late to read it out loud to the person who wrote it. Thank you for watching until the very end. Take care of the people who have never stopped loving you, even in silence. Somewhere tonight, there may be a wooden box on a dresser, a folded letter in a drawer, a phone number written in old handwriting on the back of a card that has not been dialed in years. Somewhere tonight, there may be a candle waiting to be lit, or a candle that has already been lit for far too many years without an answer. You do not need to be a billionaire to give someone back their dignity. You do not need 300 guests or a marble hallway to say the words that matter. All it takes is one small, honest moment, a knock on a door, a voice asking to be remembered. Grace waited 40 years for that knock. Not everyone gets that chance. So if there is a door in your own life you have been afraid to knock on, let this story be the reason you finally do it, before it becomes a letter someone else has to read for you instead. And I will see you in the next story.